Welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore a truly powerful event. The Sun applies to the mighty but the tiny Pluto for the first time in Aquarius in our lifetimes on the 21st of January at 12:28 p.m. Universal. At 1 degree and 42 minutes, it's within the first 2.5 degrees of the sign of Aquarius, so the first 12th harmonic. Therefore, the energy of Aquarius is amplified hugely. Now, Pluto can be a very positive and productive influence because it's about change, transformation, and if we embrace it, it can be an extremely helpful thing to go with. But very often, Pluto starts to affect our situations before we even realise. And of course, its influence can be very painful. Change isn't always easy to accept. But I'm going to go through the themes of Pluto, its more positive traits, but also its more challenging ones, but also what we can expect in the sign of the host, because of course Pluto is going to be here through to 2043 initially, before inverting into the sign of Pisces and then rewinding back into Aquarius for one final time before returning to Pisces in 244. So it's going to be with us a very long time. And of course Pluto is now in its third phase of its visitation to Aquarius, which began in March 2023 for 11 weeks. Ironically, it entered Aquarius last year on the 21st of January. Why is that ironic? It's because that is Pluto's birthday. They first thought that they identified Pluto on a slide on February the 18th. But reviewing those slides, they realised that the first photographs were taken on the 21st of January. So as this event occurs, it is celebrating Pluto's birthday in 1930, but on the 21st of January. But also it's my birthday. So you could argue that my life has been rather Plutonian. And Pluto is a planet which can be about consequences and outcomes, but because this is the beginning of the full-time presence of Pluto in the sign, and therefore the radiance of the Sun is going to magnify the energy of Pluto, this event is particularly powerful. Now I'm going to share with you the event chart for this year, because that, I feel, gives us a taste of what we can expect through to 2043. And it's incredible because the Sun and Pluto in house 9, very much about knowledge, information, but also people's credos, philosophies. But I'm also going to share with you when this last occurred, which was in 1779, 246 years ago. The American War of Independence was heating up, and France and Spain decided to pitch in on the side of the independence cause. Really fascinating, because Pluto in Capricorn, very much about big government, big power, top-down power, very orthodox. And of course we could argue that the British Empire was starting in a way to begin its long period of decline. I remember when I was at school standing up and saying, "Sir, wasn't it awful what we did to India when we were the empire?" I got absolutely battered for that comment at that time. But of course the British Empire didn't do a lot of good things, but there were lots of empires. And we also have some empires going on at the present time. So the power that is very much associated with Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, what can we expect in Aquarius? Because there is a commonality, of course. They both have the same ruler. In terms of Capricorn, Saturn is the sole domiciliary ruler. In the sign of Aquarius, Saturn is the traditional ruler. But Aquarius people do have, or Aquariusness does have a duality. On one hand, very progressive, the Uranus energy. On the other hand, very resistant to change through that Saturn. And of course, it's a fixed sign as well. Aquarius subjects are rather attached to the things that they feel comfortable with. So they don't necessarily appreciate things changing, and yet there's another part of them that can be very radical. So that energy of stick and twist is something we're all going to seriously feel at this incredibly powerful time for us all, the world over. So I'm going to also share the event chart for 1779, because there is an incredible coincidence that the Sun and Pluto were in house 9. So very much about the rights and wrongs, battles over legal views, very much to do with people's higher opinions, so the big picture, if you like. And the sign of Aquarius has some similarities in some ways to the 9th house Sagittarius energy, being a free spirit, can be outspoken, so that's interesting. But both events had an ascendant in Gemini. But what was the planet that was applying to the ascendant in 1779, and which is the planet applying to the ascendant on this event this year? Because they are very different, but that in itself is hugely fascinating. Please stay with me for more. And because the 21st of January is my birthday, I want to tell you about some changes that are coming. So, as you know, I've promoted the personal horoscope reports for some time. We produce about 70,000 words a month through the website. It takes a lot of application, a lot of dedication. It's costly, and I've been doing it for 30 years. We have to monetize our efforts in some way. Obviously there are newspapers and news groups that we supply as well, but your support is really important. But I'm passionate about sharing the great value of these charts, but I'm also sensitive that, you know, life is challenging for some people at the moment financially. So we slashed the price of those charts to half price, so you can get your 12-month forecast, but also your life roadmap report, the most important document anyone could ever read. So they're half price. But if you wanted to order something a bit different, so for example, if you wanted your 12-month draconic forecast and 12-month tropical forecast, you can choose. So you can buy one, get one free, make your own choice. You don't just have to have that package. Please see the link below for more. Also, you can have a video reading with me now. This is new. You can ask 2 questions and outline your theme, and I'll send that back to you. And I feel that that is more affordable for many people. And you can also have your solar return. So if you've got a birthday coming up, the end of January through February into March, solar return is a snapshot of where the planets are when the Sun returns to the exact degree and minute it was when you were born. It's not always on your birthday. Often is, but not exactly every year. So 2 video readings. It's not one-to-one. I'll record them, share all your charts on screen, and then email them in an encrypted format so you can read your end. But also you can have a one-to-one with me as well. And over the last 4 years, I've had about 40,000 words of testimonials from people for those. And please see the link if you'd like to work with me personally. That's a much more in-depth session, and obviously it's interactive as well. So I'm trying to tune into what people want. Very Plutonian. It is about change and adaptation. So happy to provide those options for you. And also, if you are a Patreon, thank you so much for all your support. But we are soon to launch a membership scheme for YouTube as well, and we'll let you know about that over the next 10 days or so. What can we expect of Pluto in Aquarius? Well, just like back in 1779 we saw sweeping changes, revolution, we are going to see sweeping social changes. Work from home as an example, driverless vehicles another. Obviously some new technologies coming in, not just in terms of transport, but in terms of medicine. And some of those new technologies, robotics for example, could be very, very positive because they can be so accurate. But we are going to see a lot of passion about people coming together in a collective way, but at the same time also celebrating our individual rights. So that's part of what's evolving at the present time. Now we know that AI will have some benefits, but it can also have some challenges, particularly around employment. But we are going to see a lot of technological changes around the sciences, for good or bad. But it can also be a time when powerful connections have a huge impact on our situations. And it could see some people becoming much more dissatisfied with the status quo, particularly around politics. And we are seeing that the world over. People are taking to the streets and making it clear of where they're not happy. But let's just think about the positive characteristics of Pluto. So can be a truth seeker, you know. It can be about ends and beginnings, so we know that things can naturally come to a close, but there can be the phoenix. We can have things re-emerging, which is very exciting. Very much to do with deep penetrative understanding, psychology, revealing what's hidden. It can destruct to reconstruct, of course, but it is also or has the potential for things to happen that we can't obviously see, so very much linked to the subconscious. But what about the negative influences? Well, I feel that Pluto can be about power, and power isn't always used wisely. So it can be about ruthlessness, control, domination, the underworld, of course, manipulation. It can be linked to jealousy. It's all about leveraging things. So in the sign of Aquarius, what we're going to see in terms of those more negative influences is the potential for mass manipulation. And of course, the way that that can happen more than any other way is through social media, because we're so addicted to it. You know, in a nice way, it can be sharing pictures of a new baby or a new pet, a nice holiday, and so on. Or it can be celebrating someone's life or an achievement. All of those things can be manifestly positive. But if it's to do with how we shape people's perceptions, so hearts and minds through the manipulation of information, we're talking about something that could run on the darker side. And frankly, as I've said before, we are in a post-truth time now, which in many ways is very challenging. Some people might say that I'm being a little bit naive, thinking that it was ever anything other than that, but I feel that the erosion of fact-checking has become a massive thing. It's all about how things are presented and spun. Now, the sign of Aquarius, as I mentioned before, can be progressive, can be innovative, can be open, friendly, social, can be very much to do with community, society, that Margaret Thatcher famously said didn't exist. But because of the Uranian energy, of course, it can be changeable, but critically, it can need space, work from home, but also detachment. But the sign of Aquarius is an air sign, and it's cool, and it can, in some ways, be so detached that it may struggle a little bit to stay in touch with how things feel. Now, depending on when you were born, if you have a Cancer Pluto, you're going to experience this event as an 8th house, which is quite fitting in a way because of your age, to be really honest. But in terms of Pluto, people with Pluto in Leo, it's the 7th house. Its relationships are going to change for them hugely. People with Pluto in Virgo, such as myself, very much about health, fitness, diet, perhaps extending life, finding new ways to try to be a bit more virtuous about what we eat and drink, but also a big shift in terms of the type of work that people do. Pluto in Libra, much more to do with the social dimension, maybe unusual ways that people have open relationships, for example, the different types of gender identification that have evolved in recent years. Not everyone's cup of tea. For other people, something they're very passionate about. Pluto in Scorpio, however, sees a big shift in how it all feels. And of course, Pluto is the co-regent of the sign of Scorpio. So being in Aquarius, for people who have Pluto in Scorpio from 1983 to 1995, you're going to feel this transition hugely powerfully. Pluto in Sagittarius, so you guys 1995 to 2008, the third house, it's all about communication, quick communication. You love information, but that information is something you're going to be keener to share quicker. Then we have Pluto in Capricorn, 2008 through to 2024. It's all about resources, values, foundations, big shifts there, particularly about accommodation, because the sign of Capricorn, I think, really is the physical structure of where we live. The Cancerian energy is more like the home within that physical structure. So those are some of the themes. So the sun, particularly in that first 2.5 degrees, the first dward of the sign of Aquarius, is going to magnify the energy of Pluto. So we're all realizing that this is going to be a huge shift. So on the screen now is the event chart. And you can see there's Pluto and the sun in the 9th house. 9th house, kind of Sagittarius energy, can be to do with personal independence, freedom, travel, our connections to people, but very much to do with ideologies. And it can be to do with dogmatism, undoubtedly about dogmatism. And because Pluto can be about control and Aquarius can be about us all as a collective, we must be mindful of that control. Now, Pluto can also be about money. One of the things that I feel comes up a lot in the UK is the way that it's more difficult to use cash to pay for services. And that is an opportunity to push back on that, because that keeps us in touch with a currency. Other people may be very passionate about digital currencies, for example, understandably. But what we're going to get, I feel, is some big pressure in how currencies work all around the world, because the 9th house is very much about international affairs. So we're seeing a big scrap developing, aren't we? We're going to see a new posture from the United States. It's going to be more pragmatic about Russia, perhaps. It's going to be interesting with China, but we've also got the countries in the southern part of the world have collectively come together, and they are collaborating in a way to try to push back on the power of the dollar. So how's the dollar going to do with this? We're definitely going to see more digital currencies, as we've just seen with Trump's own. But I feel that cash, particularly, is a way for us to retain some autonomy, because the sign of Aquarius can be about information. The ruler of the second decan is Mercury. Some astrologers, such as the hugely successful Stephen Forrest, would argue that Mercury is technically exalted in Aquarius, and I would really agree with that. Other people would say, no, it's the ruler of Virgo, and that's where it's exalted, because it's in its fall in Pisces. But Aquarius can be about how collective information is used. And obviously, if we don't have control over our cash, then it gets much more difficult for us to identify, how do we pay someone, 20 quid or $30 for doing a nice favour for us? All these things will all go back to someone having control. Guess what? All the banks are closing because more people do things online. Therefore, we have less face-to-face contact. But that's an Aquarius thing that could come in terms of banking, is that there could be one physical building that each bank shares between the different brands. So they have a day there where they rent the space, provide their services. That's where the cooperative, collaborative energies of Aquarius could work really well. Is there the vision? Well, it's all about the bottom line, isn't it? It's not about what people need. It's not about people being isolated or lonely. So those things are not really at the forefront. So that's where cash, very important. But the ascendant is in the bubbly Gemini. But look at where Uranus is, because Uranus is the modern ruler of the sign of Aquarius. It is actually forging a very strong link with Neptune and the North Node. But because it's in the 12th house, this to me suggests that we've got more disruptive energies heading our way. But there's an interesting thing, as I hinted before, it's Jupiter that's right on the ascendant. But guess what? Jupiter's retrograde, and it's also in its detriment in Gemini. Now, there's huge amounts of successful people with Jupiter in Gemini, and a lot of them would have had it retrograde when they were born, because Jupiter's retrograde for 4 months each year. So we can still make or can still be successful even when planets are not necessarily in their best locations. But I would say Jupiter in Gemini on the first house really points to what I'm saying about the use of information and the potential for exploitation and manipulation. Be aware of this, because it's here now. It's been here very strongly, increasingly in recent years, but it's going to come even more. Also be aware that the moon, right at the end of the sign of Libra, is in a square with Pluto and also with the sun. So as much as we might hope that some higher truths might come out that would have fairness for us all, I think that we need to be really aware that we essentially have a virtual quarter moon. It's not as such, but it's a virtual quarter moon. So it means that the moon and the sun are not collaborating, they're not integrated in a good way. So our feeling situation, our emotional needs are not represented well as Pluto and the sun start this journey. So for some people this is going to be a brave new age, but I think for many of us it could be quite challenging. But the interesting thing is that Mercury, the planet of business, Mercury is very much merchant, marketing, very much to do with Mercury, quick communication, but also its rulership of Virgo, very much about precision. In Capricorn, brilliant for business. So we're going to see a lot of conversation about international trade. And look at the position of Mercury to Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn. So there's a mutual receptivity, but also Venus, which is exalted, the money planet, in Pisces, but in the 11th house of the collective. So that suggests that a new reality, particularly with Saturn and Venus in a conjunction, finances are going to be reset. You know, we are becoming more aware that things cost more. They cost the planet more, they cost us in a physical sense more. So the cost of property, whether it's rented or in terms of buying, is unlikely really to go down anytime soon. So, but if we do want to find new ways to trade, it's a positive chart, I feel. Now let's look at that 1779 chart. It's incredible how similar it is. So the ascendant in Gemini, this time 14 degrees, but look at Uranus. And we had the American War of Independence brewing. So Uranus very much about freedom. On this year's event, it's in the dark, long grass. There's going to be a lot of machinations going on out of sight. But when this event occurred, it was broad daylight. We want change. Change is going to happen. You can see the Sun and the Pluto conjunction wildly are in the 9th house at 1 degree and 26 minutes. So this was the 21st of January 1779 at 12:45 universal. But the other takeout of this chart is the position of Mars, which is at home, therefore it's in its essential dignity. And look at that, it's in a square with both Pluto and the Sun. So the two rulers of Scorpio were having a massive squabble. Whereas we can see on this year's chart, the moon is nearly in Scorpio, so it's a dissociate square, but this was an outright square. Again, it was a bit broad, 4 degrees. That's very close. If you had that in a natal chart, someone would be extremely strident. What we get with 6th, 9th house energy is an irritation with responsibilities and obligations and a need to assert our independence, which creates a lot of nervous energy. So those are the two charts. Isn't it incredible how similar they are in terms of the ascendant being in Gemini, Uranus on the historic chart, and Jupiter on this year's chart. So it's all about information. Did you know that Facebook started as a Aquarius business? But the power or the fear of the power that could be invested upon it has meant that Meta, the holding company, are leaning into what they feel is expected of them. What do you think about that? You tell me. It's not really down to me to have the only opinion on this, but that's a little worrying. And of course, some people will just stop using it. But then Meta are very powerful because they own, I think they own Skype, I think they own WhatsApp, and they own Insta. What is going to be your decision? Some people have already moved away from what was called Twitter, now X, because of the political bias of the owner. And are we going to see more of that kind of citizen rebellion, if you like? So we're voting with our feet. We're certainly seeing big changes in terms of how we exist. So a lot more technology, we're at home, we can connect to people but in an isolated way. But we're also seeing quite harsh ways of people. The latest thing I've found out about is that people will hook up on a dating app, meet someone, have sex, but then don't even get in touch after the event. And that has a name. I don't know what the name is, but it's the next stage of ruthless exploitation of people, the lack of humanity. So over the time that Pluto moves through Aquarius, my prediction is what we've got at the moment is because of the duality of Aquarius, and because we're at the start of the process. Pluto's about consequences and outcomes. We're not going to get that at the start. It's almost like having an ace in, or the ace of wands, or the ace of swords in tarot. They're very often the start of something. So this is a starter event in a way, even though it's our third taste. But because the sun's in the mix, which we all depend on for our life force, is particularly potent. So I would say that we need to be aware that what's going on at the moment is much more to do with the conjunction between Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter. Jupiter, the planet which rules Sagittarius and is manifestly powerful on the ascendant on this chart, is very much about dogma, knowledge, ideologies. Saturn, the structure, and Pluto, the change. So of course COVID came along with that combination. So what we're getting now in the wider world is almost like a super tanker. When a super tanker wants to turn, it can't turn on a sixpence. It takes miles to turn effectively and safely. So the outcome of what we have now is more about that Capricornian energy, and we are seeing some people who do feel that government's too big, it's not nimble enough, that people are too dependent on the state, don't take enough personal responsibility. Totally concur with all of that, but some of that could be to do with Neptune in Pisces since 2012 full time, and that of course is going to move into Aries for just over 7 months from the end of March this year. But what I feel that we're going to see as the younger people who are much more influenced, particularly by Pluto and Sagittarius, come through into roles of leadership, we're going to see those people adopt and want to embrace the more noble energies of Aquarius, which is about higher truths. But at the moment, we're not going to see truth. We're seeing the dissemination of truth in every which way possible in order to maintain power. So we're seeing that hugely in Russia. And of course, we're now going to see it even more in the Western world as well, because the more that you can predicate your message and people buy into that message, the more you get what you want. And therefore, because Pluto can be about business from its rulership of the sign of long-term shared resources, Scorpio, we are going to see initially the use of language, networks, communicational platforms in order to steer people's agendas. But what we're going to see over time is much more of the rebelliousness that the sign of Aquarius is known for. And particularly, to be honest, although the first decan is technically ruled, some people would say by Saturn alone, others would say Uranus, but it's both. What we are going to see is some people pushing back, being much more outspoken about asserting what they don't like, what's happened, for example, in the Middle East. And, you know, for some people, That's a very polarizing debate, just as much as Ukraine can be as well. So a lot more people are going to find their voice. So we're going to see a lot more citizens taken to the street even. And I want to tell you about the role of Uranus, because you know that Uranus is moving into the sign of Gemini from the 7th of July through to the 7th of November for 4 months. But in the run up to that event, what we're going to see is that Uranus is going to apply to Algol. And Algol is one of the most feared fixed planets. So we're going to have a period through the spring, the late spring in the northern hemisphere and the late autumn in the south, where as Uranus moves forward, and remember Uranus is about revolution, it applies to Algol, and that is going to be extremely potent. As it does so, it will square off with Donald Trump's ascendant just before it moves into the sign of Gemini. That's going to be really, really interesting, because Uranus is a searcher of truths, higher truths, but it's very disrupted in the sign of Taurus. It was right from the off. It was in a square with Mars. We're also going to see, of course, the square between the Sun and Pluto, which is going to happen at the start of its time in Taurus. We're also going to see the opposition at the start of its time in Leo, and then again that's going to be repeated at the start of its time in Scorpio. So who will this event most affect? Well, if you are someone with late degrees in the cardinal sign, so just going from the first cardinal sign, so about 28 degrees Aries through to the first couple of degrees of Taurus, but again, if we're talking about late Cancer, last couple of degrees of Cancer, the first couple of degrees of Leo, the late degrees of Libra, the first couple of degrees of Scorpio, or of course the late degrees of Capricorn and the first couple of degrees of Aquarius, you're going to feel this event in a very angular way. So, for example, for Aquarius people, it's the transformation, particularly based on what house your sun is in. So in my house, it's the 3rd house. It's about how I think, my ideals, how I express myself, my message. Can be about the media, could be a medium like YouTube, but it's certainly very much about how I think and articulate. And the 3rd house can also be very interactive, but it's our connection with neighbours, siblings, and it's very quick and lively. So that's where it is for me, but for you it could be in another house altogether. If you don't know your houses, you don't even know your natal chart, download one for free underneath this video. It's the best free natal chart you will ever see. If you are an Aries, because of the late position of your sun, your ascendant, your moon, whatever planet you have late in Aries, it is of course, or has been, in a square with Pluto. So that's not easy at all. So Pluto for you is manifesting itself on your 10th house cusp. So very much to do with change around your work, how you connect to the wider world, your relationships with people who are influential, or your desire for power in terms of those environments. What about Cancer? It's all about some big changes, because Pluto through your 7th house was about your relationships. You may have made some tough decisions about setting your boundaries, but because you don't generally like confrontation, there may be some things that you decided to withdraw from that weren't necessarily, didn't give you a proper outcome. It was like unfinished business. With Pluto moving into the 8th house, there can be some revelations coming in your own thinking or up from your own soul, which could surprise you hugely. But the 8th house can, of course, be about ends. So if there is anything that isn't working well for you, a business relationship, a personal partnership, a friendship, there could be an ending, just like there could be if you're an early born Leo. So relationships for Leo is very much what it's about, but for Cancer, in a different way, it's more like 8th house energy. So deep truths, deep deconstruction, death, essentially, but around relationships. But for Pluto in the 7th house for Leo, it can be an opportunity to become much more aware of what other people need from you, how other people see you, what other people need from you, not just what you need from them, which is often respect, admiration, adulation. So there could be some pushback in some ways if you've got early planets in Leo. People can become much firmer in their response to you. You can become much more conscious of those so-called open enemies, as it's described in traditional astrology. And then for late Librans, there's been a lot of challenges since 2008 for Libran people generally around home, family, and where you live. And it's not been at all easy. So if you're very late in Libra, some of that stuff may still be going on. But if you're very early in Scorpio, having Pluto squaring the Sun for you, now that is something you're going to need to work on, because that's an evolution of your identity, but in a more emotional way. For Taurus people, early born Taurus people, it's rather like with Scorpio, it's the square. So again, it could be around your work that there's big changes going on. Also, maybe to do with parents, older connections, anything to do with property, maybe an area of big change for you. So that gives you a flavour. It could be argued that Pluto in the 1st degree of Aquarius affects everybody who's got a planet or a position or an angle at the start of any zodiac sign. So for example, let's think about Gemini. So for Gemini, we've got a lovely trine. If we're talking about Virgo, we're talking about a quincunx. That's more challenging, harder to integrate, and so on. So it affects everyone beyond the angles of those late cardinal, early fixed signs. So please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 signs to give you a flavour of what to expect. I'm not going to go into massive depth on this because I have a deep dive video on Pluto in 2025. I'll share that beneath this video and you can check that out. I did get a lot of views, and that goes into more depth about the individual zodiac signs and all the aspects that are going to be forged this year. But just in terms of what we can expect of Pluto and Aquarius with this especially powerful conjunction, here goes for Aries. Do you know, for you Aries, I think Saturn in the 12th house is very intrinsically linked to what's going on with this, because that's probably made you very aware of some things that were coming to an end in your life. And it could be friendships, it could be interests, it could be types of jobs that you've been doing. Since 2008, you've probably been very engrossed in your connection to the world. You could have gained much greater recognition for your talents, or something that you used to do professionally may just not work anymore because the world has changed. That technology or that craft or talent you had needed to alter in order to deal with those evolving changes. So for you, I think Pluto's asking you to think about the long term, but it's definitely asking you to think about your more noble mission. It's what really inspires you. And if you have had some disappointments around friendships, romantic relationship or work, you may still be needing to divest of that disappointment whilst look forward to the future. So I think for you, this is one foot in the past and one foot in the future. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below. Or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me, or about your solar return, please see about that below too. Taurus, what is your role in life? You've gained huge amounts of knowledge in recent years. It's been an exciting, if at times unsettling, period for you because of Uranus being in your sign 4 times since 2019, but particularly because of Pluto being in your 9th house. So because the sign of Capricorn can be about work, it can be about our worldly situation. You may have travelled with your work, you may have gained more qualifications, you may have learned a language. There's been a lot of change. But how's it all going to pitch up for you now? Pluto and the Sun come together in your 10th house. Very much to do with responsibilities, but also to do with power, needing greater recognition. So if you're not quite in the job or life role that really gives you a sense of satisfaction, that's going to be the area that keeps changing until you do get to where you really need to be. If you're someone who's gone through huge changes and you're totally aligned to what you want to do in terms of that worldly connection, you're going to thrive and thrive incredibly well. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below, or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me or about your solar return, please see about that below too. So Gemini, for you, the 9th house is about travel, it's about expansion, it's very exciting. And because the ascendant's in your sign and it's very close to Jupiter, the planet of fortune, why not have a sense of positivity? It is the case that Mercury, your ruler, is also in Capricorn. So if you have had to work on transforming your shared resources, a business idea, how you earn to live in, or there's been things to get through like legacies, inheritances, property matters in recent years, there is still the potential for some of that because of Mercury being in Capricorn still, but it is forging an excellent alliance with Venus and also with Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn. So for you, I feel that there's going to be some freshness, but it could be around your work. More travel, more knowledge, more connections with different people. Your message can get out there more. If you're someone who does enjoy writing, you've always felt that you've got that so-called book inside of you, you're probably going to write it between now and 2043. So go for it. You may even think about moving or living somewhere overseas. You're certainly wanting to be more adventurous with Pluto's help. So it's about breaking free of limiting thinking and limiting situations. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below, or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me or about your solar return, please see about that below too. Cancer, as I mentioned when I was talking about the angles, particularly if you're a very late born Cancer, this event very, very potent indeed. If you're an early born Cancerian, it's more of a quincunx initially, but essentially the 8th house, which is where Pluto is, therefore brings much more into focus that scorpionic energy. So about deep transformation in terms of how you connect to others, who's really meaningful, where you're most invested spiritually, psychologically, sexually, intimately. All of those things are coming up for review, but because Pluto is very much in touch with these things, it could be very vivid and very powerful almost straight away. Particularly if you're an early born Cancerian. If you're a latter born Cancerian, it could be that something around a relationship which didn't go well in recent years needs to be reflected on and released, or you need to detach from a relationship which just isn't working. And because the planet of relating, Venus, is very close to Saturn, it's going to make you particularly aware on this event of where relationships are not satisfactory. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below, or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me or about your solar return, please see about that below too. So Leo, since March 2023 for 11 weeks, 21st of January 24 to the 2nd of September, and then again from the 19th of November round to now, and now with the Sun's application to Pluto, you've been becoming much more aware of connections to others, because your sign is about showcasing talent, flair, warmth, charisma. It is about seeking the limelight. It's taking center stage. Now, if you're a person who's able to collaborate well with people, forge productive partnerships, those can really thrive in the years to come. If you're someone who's a bit more focused on doing it for how it works for you, the individual, this could be quite challenging, particularly if you've been in a relationship of any kind that perhaps has got into a bit of a rut. You may find that the other person or people want more. They want more acknowledgement of how they feel. They're setting their boundary more. Or it could be you needing to do that, because of course everyone is completely unique. They're not just ruled by their ascendant or the sun. It is the house, for example, in your natal chart that this Pluto position is going to occupy, and the other angles that Pluto forges in your natal chart, and so on, or this move in Pluto forges to planets in your natal chart. So, but broadly, it's all about relationships. And in traditional astrology, the 7th house cusp is about open enemies. That can be the people that we need to compete with professionally, colleagues, other businesses. It can be where we want to do a sport, which is quite a one-to-one, such as tennis, squash, badminton, chess, where it has a direct opponent. That could be something that becomes much more intriguing and exciting. If you want someone to come into your world in a really meaningful partnership, that could definitely happen for you over the years to come. But equally, of course, Pluto can be about what comes to a close. So if a relationship isn't working in a proper way, the ins and outs, the checks and balances between the give and the get is out of alignment, you're going to have to look at it quite honestly. And because your nature is to think about where you can manifest what you need from situations, this could be quite challenging for some Leos, particularly if you've got Mars in Leo or perhaps the Moon as well. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below, or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me or about your solar return, please see about that below too. So Virgo, you have a reputation of being someone who has an appreciation of virtue, the Virgin. But of course, your awareness to things like cleanliness, hygiene, processes that are well ordered and efficient, that's terrific. But sometimes in the case of Virgos, it makes me think about when I used to be in business management and marketing, and you can have some businesses that are so good at producing a product, they get better and better at producing the product, but they're not aware of the market. So the market's changing, they keep refining the product. It's the finest ball bearings in the world, but actually manufacturers don't want steel ball bearings, they're too expensive. They want cheap nylon or disposable ones that they know will wear out in 2 or 3 years, but it gets their costs down. So businesses and us as people always need to be mindful of how the world is changing. And I feel that Pluto moving into the 6th house in these 3 stages, it's been pushing and prompting you, particularly with Uranus in your 9th house, to change up something that may have worked well for you for a very long time. And it may feel rather uncomfortable. It could be about your diet. It could be about the amount of exercise you're getting. It could be that you've stuck with a job because you're very good at the job. You can do it standing on your head, but in some ways it's so adopted by you, it's not really a challenge. It's not really bringing out the best of you. It's not pushing you enough. So in a way, Pluto in your 6th house is asking you to look at the very things that you're blooming brilliant at, but being aware of how you've changed since Pluto first went into Capricorn in 2008, but also how the world's changed as well. And that's really it for you. Some kind of change around all those practical routines is inevitable. If you resist it, it's going to be much more difficult. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below, or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me or about your solar return, please see about that below too. So Libra, those Capricorn years weren't easy, as we both know, but you ended up with a huge amount of extra information and insights about what's really important to you at the heart of your situation. But it is a much more flamboyant conjunction between the Sun and Pluto, which really gives you a lot of encouragement to showcase your charisma over the years to come. But of course, your ruler Venus is trapped off by the potentially restrictive energies of Saturn. What to make of that? Well, Mercury in your 4th house, where Pluto was, suggests if there is something creative you're doing, maybe it's to do with a hobby, that could become something more important around your work. But whatever you do, you'll be able to blend flair with practicality. And that's going to be one of the themes of the Pluto in Aquarius years based on this particular event chart. But also, I just feel that when it comes to your social situation, if you have found yourself not so keen to join in, mix and mingle, a much more interactive, playful and sociable part of your life is set to unfold. It is true that with Saturn going into your opposite sign from the 26th of May through to the end of August, if there is a weak romantic relationship in your world, it could be tested and it could be shook out, particularly when Uranus goes into Gemini for the 4 months from the 7th of July. But also what Saturn on your 7th house cusp can do, along with this Pluto in Aquarius energy, is help you to be more self-assertive and confident about sharing what you need in situations. And the more you do, the more people will respond to how you feel about yourself in a much more positive way. So I see this as a time of particular gains for you, and certainly a great opportunity to demonstrate to people how talented you are in all sorts of ways. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below, or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me or about your solar return, please see about that below too. So Scorpio, what makes this event so powerful for you is that your modern higher octave ruler, Pluto, is in the mix, but also your more traditional ruler, Mars, is in a retrograde in a sign that it's not at its best in. But for you, Mars being in Cancer is about freedom, but the position of the Sun applying to Pluto in your 4th house is about your need for emotional comfort, security, tranquility, or is it within yourself that the changes are going to show? So over the years to come, it's entirely possible that there could be some major changes about how you feel about things, but also around your family dynamic. Perhaps your need for a particular type of environment will shift. You may be someone at the moment who has enjoyed quite a quiet location. You could find yourself yearning for something that's more exciting with Mars in your 9th house. But what can happen with Mars in the 9th and the conjunction in your 4th is the desire to escape something that isn't working very well, whether it is a noisy street, whether it's a neighbour you're not keen on, whether it's a relationship which is too cloying and restrictive, whether it's wanting to break out from a more reflective life and take on a more challenging one. All of this can happen. The thing with you is that you're a fixed sign, and Scorpios tend to have very consistent patterns until something changes, and when it changes it can be very powerful and it can happen very quickly indeed. So it may be that you could use Pluto's more regenerative energies to repair a home. So you could buy somewhere or rent somewhere and take great satisfaction from restoring it to its former glories. Or you could build something from scratch. Or it may be that you want to work from home, because Pluto can be about money, the 4th house can be about where you live. But if you are in any kind of relationship that does feel rather confining, the fact that Uranus, the planet of freedom, is in your 7th house of relating and continues to be so through to the 7th of July, through to the 7th of November, suggests that if there is a situation where you just don't feel that comfortable, I think with Mars in 9 and Uranus in 7, it does point towards a big change around where you live or who you live with. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below, or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me or about your solar return, please see about that below too. Sagittarius, as I mentioned before, the speed of life is going to pick up for you. It's going to be very, very exciting. And because you have a passion for ideas and knowledge, if you are someone who is very good with technology. You could have a sensational time with this, but also you can find yourself becoming much more active in your community, providing voluntary services, support for other people who may be less fortunate. But don't underestimate the power of your ideas or how people hang on what you say. Whether it's through karaoke, whether it's through a local club or hobby group, or it's something that's a bit more profound, your voice will be heard. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below, or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me or about your solar return, please see about that below too. Capricorn, your sign is about physical culmination, so it is very practical. You're an earth sign and you try to be very realistic because of the role of Saturn. Uranus has been pushing you to be a bit more avant-garde in recent years. Why not? Good for you if you've done different things. And of course, even if you are a Capricorn, if you've got Aquarius energy in your chart or Sagittarius energy, you may be someone who's much more of a free spirit and doesn't conform to that archetype of being someone who's a very solid citizen, but maybe a little bit risk averse, because Uranus in the 5th house can be very much to do with speculation. But of course, Pluto and the Sun in the 2nd house can be everyday money, but your foundations, it can be your values. Those are the areas that are going to change. If you can weave those 2 energies in together, particularly when Uranus moves into Gemini, you may find you coming up with some very imaginative ideas to transform your finances as this coming year goes on, for sure. But immediately you may find yourself being much more attached to what you believe is the value of something. So that could see you marshalling your financial resources much more carefully, but also even more shrewdly. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below, or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me or about your solar return, please see about that below too. So Aquarius, as Pluto was making its way through those last few degrees of Capricorn, you probably became even more conscious of who wasn't for you. And at times that may have created quite a lot of insecurity. But it also gave you an opportunity to look at your frailties, vulnerabilities and fears. And the more you dived in and embraced them and realized that they are actually part of the human condition and accepted some of those things about you, that's all preparing the way for you to step into a new dawn that can be so incredibly dynamic. But it will require you to go with change. And some Aquarius people can be very resistant to change. Others just flow along a lot more, particularly if you've got some Pisces planets in your natal chart. But if you are someone who's a bit more traditional, do start to prepare yourself that if you don't look for those changes to unfold, it's possible that events around you will present situations which almost push you into a change that you won't really be managing, you'll be reacting to. But if you are someone who has in some ways lacked a little bit of confidence to strut your stuff in a truly unique way, the combination of the Sun and Pluto, especially if you've got planets or influences at the start of Aquarius, really can supercharge you and give you a huge platform to show just how incredibly dynamic, individualistic, but exciting that you can be to be with. Please check out your 50% off personal horoscope forecast offer below, or if you'd like to ask me 2 questions and have a video reading with me or about your solar return, please see about that below too. So Pisces, your rulers of Jupiter and Neptune are very much in this event. Neptune in that conjunction with the North Node, and of course Jupiter on the ascendant, which for you is very much about how you feel about your immediate home, your environment, perhaps some of the conditioning that you experienced when you were very young. Now Pluto and the Sun being in the 12th house could make you much more conscious. It could make you a lot more nostalgic for your past, but it could steer you towards looking at some tender strands that you may have been a little bit reluctant to embrace in the past. The subconscious, for example. But you're at a huge advantage with Pluto in the 12th house because yours is the 12th sign. If you are someone who's very interested in healing, if you're really interested in expanding your consciousness, if meditation, if anything to do with the psychic world, the spiritual dimension is something you feel very comfortable with, which is often the case, what Pluto can do in some ways is amplify your talents over the years to come and help you to help others in an even more impressive way. However, if you're one of those Pisces people who lives life in a much more guarded way when it comes to the feeling side of life, this could be quite a challenging time, because in some ways it can shake you up and make you much more conscious that life isn't forever. It isn't just in the physical realm. It is to do with some things that we don't necessarily see. It's not all about the tangibles. Now, of course, you will still, even if you are a very practical, scientific type of Pisces, you still will be using your instincts at the time, but you're going to find that really diving into all the things that can help you to understand what makes you and others tick at a much deeper level are going to become something that's incredibly appealing to you, and you may find it very hard to resist for many years to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this Sun conjunct Pluto special deep dive. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. All your views are truly appreciated. If you've yet to watch your February deep dive zodiac forecast, please see the link beneath this video to do so. Take care and goodbye for